One of the most powerful benefits of working with Node.js is the ecosystem of open source JavaScript libraries and tools available to us. In order to make use of these libraries and tools, we need a way to find, install, and manage them. That's exactly what npm helps us with. npm is both the standard command line tool for installing Node.js dependencies and a public database of JavaScript packages available for download. In this tutorial, we'll explore the different parts that make up npm. We'll define some commonly used terms that relate to npm. We'll learn about the role the npm registry plays in the JavaScript ecosystem, as well as discuss the npm CLI and briefly touch on an alternative package manager called Yarn. npm is the widely popular Node package manager. Developers around the world use it every day to help them write their applications. As a whole, it represents the entry point into the ecosystem of open source JavaScript modules and the tooling around working with and managing those modules. One of the biggest benefits of developing with Node.js is leveraging this ecosystem. npm provides us access to code distributed on the npm registry. Reusing code written by others is core to creating any application and helps minimize the amount of code you need to write and maintain yourself. npm makes managing that code much easier for developers. For folks new to Node.js, the tricky bit is often understanding that npm is actually made up of a few different things. These include the npm registry, which is the public database of JavaScript packages available for download, the npmjs.com website, which acts as a front end to the registry and is where you can search for packages to use in your applications. There is also the npm command line tool, which is used to download packages from npm and put them into the proper place in your application. And finally, there's npm Incorporated, which is the company that maintains the public npm registry. Let's briefly examine each of these to get a better idea of how everything works together to create the developer experience that Node.js is famous for. First off, let's define some important terms you'll often see used in the context of npm. You can find links to documentation for some of these terms in the written version of this tutorial. When it comes to npm, a package is a unit of code that can be published to the npm registry. What makes it a package is the presence of a package.json file. You aren't required to publish your packages to npm, but everything published to npm must be a package. Package.json is a JSON file which describes important metadata about a package, such as the dependencies it requires and other important metadata the npm CLI uses to interact with a package. Modules are reusable units of code that are used directly in your application through importing them with the require function. Node.js comes with some built-in modules which you don't need to install to use, like the HTTP module, for example. There are also local modules that you write yourself, and external modules which you install from npm. A module is the actual code of a package. An npm package is a way to distribute modules to others. This is done by packaging the module with a package.json file and publishing it to npm. The Node modules directory lives in the root of your application and is where packages are installed by the npm CLI tool. This directory contains the actual code of your application's dependencies. The directory is created for you when installing a project's dependencies. The Node modules folder should not be checked into version control. Moving on, let's talk about the npm registry. The npm registry is one of the most important parts of the npm ecosystem. The npm software registry is a public database of JavaScript code, tools, libraries, and frameworks which are available to download and use in your applications. The registry allows you to search for and download packages to use in your applications. The npm registry is the largest public registry of software on the internet, with currently almost 1 million packages available online. Anyone can freely distribute their JavaScript modules by publishing them as packages to npm. The registry is at the core of npm, connecting millions of developers around the world with the packages and tools they need to get their work done. Instead of writing your application entirely from scratch, you will likely use modules published to npm to aid you in your development. For example, Express.js is the most popular server framework for Node.js. You can download it from npm and have a server running in just a few lines of code. This availability of reusable modules helps to speed up Node.js development significantly by reducing the amount of application-specific code you have to write. With the incredible volume of packages available in the registry, how do you find the right one to solve your problem? That's where the npm website comes in. npmjs.com is the web front end to the npm registry. It's the central place to search through all available public packages in the npm ecosystem. Each package in the registry has its own page on the npm website, where you can view package details, usage statistics, links to the package's repository and issue tracker, and other metadata about each package. This information is very helpful when deciding on a package to use for your application. Because anyone can publish to the NPM registry, there is no guarantee of quality for any particular package. So how do you decide which one to choose? Well, first off, there are no definitive rules for how to pick a package. When possible, we suggest you choose a package which is popular, actively maintained, and focuses on the problem you're trying to solve most specifically. Popularity and active maintenance are less than perfect indicators of quality. However, they're useful heuristics when deciding which package to use. Why? Because in general, you want to work with projects which are healthy and actively maintained so that bugs get fixed and the project gets better over time. When in doubt about choosing a package, do an internet search for your problem domain plus NPM packages and see what others are using. There are hundreds of thousands of packages to choose from on NPM, but the most popular packages account for a small fraction of that. Choosing a popular package is typically a safe bet because there are likely more examples and prior knowledge available online for you to benefit from. Let's take a look at a package listing on npmjs.com and some of the information available to help us choose a package. Each package published to NPM has its own page on npmjs.com. The page will list metadata about the project and pulls in the project's README file. We can take a look at the information on this page to help us gauge if the package is active. The main body of the page is pulled from the README file for the package. Hopefully this will have some getting started information and links to any documentation. Some of the most important stats on the page are the weekly downloads count. This measures how many times the package has been downloaded in the past 7 days. Express is one of the most popular packages on the NPM registry, so 5.5 million weekly downloads, that's about right. That is an extremely popular package. Now, just so you know, these download numbers can be a little bit misleading because this is actually a measurement of how many times the package has been downloaded, period, in the past week. That could be from caching services, which are caching different packages. It could be in development. It could be CI, CD servers. It could even be somebody writing a script to download their package thousands of times a day. As a rough estimate, it's a pretty good measurement of how popular a package is. Another important indicator of package health and activity is the publish date, the last time that this package was published with a new version to NPM. Now, Express is a very stable package, so it was last updated 7 months ago. That's fine, but this is a pretty good indication of whether or not the package is still being used. If the last published date was a year ago or more, then maybe the package has gone stale. We can also take a look at the version number and also the number of published versions. The published versions will show you all of the published versions available to download and when they were published. This is useful because if a package is still at version 1.00 or below, there's a really good chance that it hasn't been updated since the first time it was ever published. When trying to decide what package to use, we can also take a look at how many dependencies the package uses itself. As you can see, Express has 30 different dependencies it uses. I'm not going to tell you that less dependencies is better, because it's simply not that simple. But if you're concerned about the overall weight of your application, choosing packages with fewer dependencies will reduce the overall size of your application. If you want to see how large a package is once it's been installed, you can go to bundlephobia.com and put in the name of the package to be able to see how large it actually is. So we put in Express, which has a bundle size minified of 386.2 kilobytes and minified gzipped 217 kilobytes. Now that's not small, but for a package that does as much as Express, that's actually a pretty good size. So you can also see which dependencies of the package actually make up the bulk of it. Another useful piece of information when choosing a package is how many open issues there are on the package's issue tracker. I don't recommend judging on number alone, as a more popular package is bound to have more issues, but clicking through the dependency tracker can give you an idea of how old the issues are, and whether or not the maintainers are actively responding to the issues. Now that you understand what the NPM registry is, how it helps us, and how to find packages to download, let's look at how we interact with the registry using the NPM CLI tool. When people talk about NPM in the context of installing dependencies or developing an application, there's a good chance they mean the NPM CLI. The NPM CLI is the default package manager that comes bundled with Node.js. When installing Node.js, the NPM CLI is installed by default. The NPM CLI helps you install and manage dependencies for your Node.js project. It is responsible for fetching packages from the NPM registry and installing them into your Node modules directory where they are accessible from your code. When installing new dependencies, NPM will also update the dependencies listing in your package.json file. Before you can begin installing dependencies for your project, your application needs to have a package.json file already. The npm CLI reads your package.json to inform it how to start your project, which dependencies to install, and much more. Keep in mind that the npm registry is hosted online, so the npm CLI requires an internet connection to install packages. Without an internet connection, you can't add new dependencies from npm, but otherwise the CLI works fine offline. The npm CLI is useful beyond just installing dependencies. It's with us during all stages of our development cycle. It helps us create, run, manage, and share Node.js packages and applications. There's lots of commands available, but here are some of the most important ones. The most common command by far is npm install, which helps you install dependencies for your project. npm init is a command which is used to generate a package.json file. npm update helps us update the installed versions of our dependencies. npm uninstall removes dependencies from both package.json and the node modules directory. npm run helps us run scripts set up in your package.json. npm start runs your project's start script. And npm publish publishes your package to the npm registry. The npm CLI is not the only package manager tool available for Node.js. There is another very popular tool called Yarn, which also helps you interact with the npm registry. Yarn is an open source JavaScript package manager created and maintained by the folks at Facebook. Many people prefer using Yarn over the npm CLI, and it was created to address certain shortcomings of older versions of npm. In general, Yarn works very similarly to the npm CLI. They both access the npm registry, both help you download and manage dependencies, and both interact with the data stored in your package.json. The differences between the two used to be more pronounced. Yarn was faster at downloading packages and allowed you to use lock files to create an exact and reproducible dependency tree. However, since version 5 of the npm CLI, released in 2017, npm has added features and improvements which have adopted many of the benefits that Yarn provides. The remaining small differences between the two tools are outside the scope of this tutorial. You may see Yarn used around the web, but know that at the end of the day, it's a personal choice, or perhaps a choice your team makes for you. Most of what you learn about the npm CLI transfers over to Yarn. We've chosen to focus on the npm CLI since it's the standard package management tool for Node.js. Finally, the last piece of what npm is npm Incorporated, the company, which is responsible for hosting and maintaining the npm registry and npmjs.com. npm began as an open source project created in 2009. Since then, npm has grown substantially as Node.js and JavaScript have begun to eat the world of software. In 2014, npm Incorporated was founded. Their stated mission is to continue to offer the npm registry as a sustainable free service, even as the resources required to maintain the registry continue to grow. The company's main for-profit product offers private publishing of packages to the npm registry for use internally by companies, teams, and enterprise businesses. But a paid account is purely optional, and npm remains a free service that you aren't required to register for. The npm registry is a critical part of the JavaScript ecosystem, and it's important to understand who is in charge of that ecosystem. Currently, that is npm Incorporated, as they control the registry and make decisions about the future of npm. To recap, we explored the different parts that make up npm as a whole. We defined commonly used terms related to npm. We learned about the role that the npm registry plays in the JavaScript ecosystem. And we discussed the npm CLI and the alternative tool Yarn.